American South. We don't talk about slavery, we don't talk about lynching, we don't talk about segregation. We've actually littered the landscape with the iconography of the Confederacy, which we romanticize, we honor. And I think that has left us vulnerable to replicating those features of white supremacy that we've actually never repudiated. This is the entrance of the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration, and we have this icon to just talk about this uniquely American challenge of being a nation that's recovering from the legacy of slavery and also being the nation with the highest rate of incarceration in the world. Montgomery, a city shaped by slavery, because in fact that is the history of this community.
It's almost overwhelming how many of these people are represented. It's sobering. And I'm thinking about how I'm glad my family, maybe glad is not a word I should use. I'm grateful that our story ended differently. Because all of these people, their story is much more tragic.
People in this country were acculturated, socialized into seeing black people mistreated, abused, brutalized, tortured. And that optic becomes key to how we can sociologically get comfortable with the phenomenon of lynching. I think for African Americans who were forced to remain silent about this violence, that's what terrorism can do. It can, many people were lynched because they complained about a loved one being lynched, and it would get them lynched too. And it creates a kind of weight, a kind of burden.
I was not aware of my uncle's story. I was actually a grown woman when I talked to my dad, and I was visiting at home, and we were just having one of our chats. And he told me the story of my Uncle Fred and how he actually was sent away as a young boy and never came back. That's how he migrated eventually to New York. Fred was about 15 and he was away working that morning. A little girl said someone pushed her off of a back porch. So her dad wanted to find out who pushed her off the back porch. And they said, well, we know it was Fred. She was with them. It was a group of men. She said it was not Tom's boys, but the group wanted it to be my Uncle Fred. And my granddad, he had more than likely seen a hanging. He knew how that would end. So he had my daddy to run downtown to tell Fred to not come back. And from there, my granddad took Fred to Chattanooga. And from Chattanooga, he eventually ended in New York, and that is where he's buried today. There was 11 children in all, but my dad is the only one buried in Gaston.
You know, the black people that fled this region by the millions in response to this terror didn't go to Cleveland and Chicago and Detroit as immigrants. They went there as refugees and exiles from terror in the American South. Henry Smith, 17, is a very famous lynching in Paris, Texas in 1893 because 10,000 people showed up to watch this lynching. And we had several of these public spectacle lynchings. John Hartfield was lynched in Ellisville, Mississippi. They actually advertised the lynching in the newspaper. And this accommodation of violence and terror was something that was frequent, which is why you would sometimes have hundreds or thousands of people celebrating their ability to exercise this kind of control over black people. And whether you were the person cutting off the fingers and mutilating the bodies, or you were the person enjoying your deviled eggs and lemonade while this spectacle violence took place, something tragic is happening to you. People brought their children, they made their little kids watch human beings be burned or drowned or beaten. And I think that creates a kind of injury. And it has certainly created a disease where we've become indifferent to the victimization of black and brown people. And we have to treat that disease.
Last month, when I got off work, there were two men in a black pickup with two huge Confederate flags flapping in the night, following me home. They pulled over to the side and just looked at me. And I just looked at them. I guess it was an intimidation tactic, maybe. I pulled off and I hauled down that street, and they were behind me. This is in Gaston, 2018. I have very good neighbors. I just wanted to make it to my street. Went on past, once I turned off onto my street, that was it.
The African American community has lived this pain and live with it even still. When black visitors leave this space, they're going to go places where they're going to be presumed dangerous and guilty and have to navigate that. Even when they get their coffee at a Starbucks, recent events tell us you can be targeted. And so I think for people of color who have to live with this reality, experiencing it for a moment should be something we're all willing to do.